Okay, everyone, welcome. So this is going to be about Google Forms, taking your hybrid classroom to the next level. My name is Joshua Jodoin. You can call me Dr. J from Konan University in Japan. And I am excited and honored to be here at the 9th BELTA International Virtual Conference. So today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about hybrid teaching. We're going to talk specifically about Google Forms and using that in the hybrid classroom. And then I've got some closing thoughts. And for this video in particular, at the end of the 20-minute session, I'm going to actually show you how to make a very simple Google Form attendance sheet. So the 20-minute presentation that you'll see now is what I will be giving live in the presentation. And then afterward, if you're interested, there will be a small session on how to create sort of a basic Google form for attendance. So 2 truths and a lie. One of these is a lie about myself. 2 of them are true. The intention of this in the live session will be to show how we can use Google Forms for these types of things, or even Zoom polls. To give you the answer, the first one is true. I'm a graduate of Global Environmental Studies from Kyoto University. I have been teaching for over 12 years at the university level. I've taught in South Korea, Canada, China, Turkey, and now Japan, where I call home now. And I am originally from Canada, but I live in Kobe. So a little tiny lie in the last one. My research is, my main source of research is looking at sustainable development, language education, putting those 2 things together. So language education for sustainable development. And why am I telling you about this? Because if you are interested in learning a little bit more about this, you will have the opportunity at the end. There is a form that you can fill out, and I will contact you with more information at the end. And there's also a video of a recent conference presentation I did at the Japan Association of Language Teaching this past year. So here is a Google Forms survey. And of course, in the recorded session, I'm not going to have time to go into much detail, but I wanted to show what kind of power surveys have and how you can do them live and in action. So I'm working in different ways to do this. If you're interested during the video presentation, feel free to jump in and complete the survey, and you can sort of get a sense of what Google Forms can be used for. Okay, so I want to give a little bit of background. So I'm going to talk about hybrid teaching and learning, but this isn't my main focus. As I mentioned before, language education for sustainable development is. But because I've been teaching for a long time, and I, like all of you, was forced online this past semester, I learned a lot of different lessons, and I used a lot of different tools online, like Google Forms, like Flipgrid, like Moodle. Today, though, because of our limited time, I'm going to focus just on Google Forms. So I'll give you a little bit of background and then talk about Google Forms. So hybrid learning is really a combination of 2 different things. So we've got face-to-face, right, which is what we are used to doing as teachers, where we're actually in a classroom with students, and we are able to interact with them on one-on-one basis or in groups, have students interact with each other. Typically, like behind me, you'll see I'm in a classroom right now at my university. So we have a space to do that kind of thing. And then we've got online teaching, which is essentially completely removed from a physical classroom, where we're using a virtual classroom. And there's many different ways to do online teaching. So today I'm going to be talking about sort of hybrid as sort of a combination of these 2 things. And there is different kinds of hybrid teaching. or learning. So here, I'm not going to spend too much detail, but we can see this extent. So there's sort of like 100% face-to-face on the left-hand side here, which is, like I said, we're actually in a classroom or a brick and mortar classroom, as it says there in the thing, and then all the way to online where we are in a virtual place. So all instruction, interaction, activities take place online. This is very much what it was like for me in the first semester of the pandemic last year in 2020, where suddenly we were thrust on Zoom and all we could access our students with was through the Zoom template. Some teachers used Moodle, some teachers used other kinds of online activities where they actually had automated things. So they actually didn't actually interact with their students whatsoever. They just had sort of an automated page where students clicked on different tasks that they had to do. And they actually didn't see their teachers at all. So that's what I'm talking about. So today we're going to be talking about this weird world in between where we start moving back into the classroom after COVID-19 and this pandemic starts coming to a close. And we're sort of doing these web-enhanced blended learning styles and hybrid learning. I'm going to call them hybrid learning for simplicity today, but just to show you that there is some different extents here. Now, in general, last year when we were suddenly forced online, we were doing emergency remote teaching. For those of you that are not familiar with the term, I'm going to define it a little bit more in detail in the next term, but essentially this is when we are forced into a situation where we have to do online teaching and we haven't had a lot of time to think about it. Usually an emergency situation like a pandemic. So this oftentimes means that we don't have a lot of time to prepare. Sometimes we don't have institutional support. So this is a real challenge. Now, as COVID-19 starts disappearing, we are going to start seeing our schools hopefully going back to some normalcy. So going back to face-to-face teaching, where we're in a physical classroom. And we're going to be hopefully doing more of sort of a hybrid, because there's a lot of really valuable lessons we learned from this emergency remote teaching experience that we now want to bring into the classroom. So just to make sure it's crystal clear, emergency remote teaching, like I mentioned before, it's temporary, it lacks resources, it's a response to a crisis, like the pandemic. And now this hybrid model is meant to be sort of longer term or transition back to face-to-face. For example, this next semester for me, it looks like most of my classes are going to be face-to-face, but some will still be online. And that depends on the situation in Japan, as it's very, it changes day to day in terms of the pandemic. And of course, the hybrid teaching starts to have more faculty support. We've built this understanding, this knowledge from this ERT that we suddenly had to deal with, and we're now using that and trying to put those things together in our new classrooms. So just to give you a bit of an idea, face-to-face is very good for establishing social presence, right? We're face-to-face with our students. We can see their facial expressions and react to them in real time. It's very, very good for feedback, where we can, grab a student's work physically, read through it, mark it up, help the student. It's good for sort of brainstorming on board, where we have all of these extra tools like whiteboards and blackboards and things where we can use. And face-to-face is really good for setting students up for sort of more self-paced learning, where we give them a set of tasks and we get them to go do it. They can have access to links on Moodles, for example, or online learning environments, and they can do it themselves. We can also automate a lot of things online. So I'm going to be telling you about Google Forms. Specifically, Google Forms is an amazing resource for automating these types of things. And then we can also do a lot of really interesting collaboration and support. So Zoom is really great for setting up rooms and having students work in rooms and interact with each other in rooms where they can chat with each other, they can create whiteboards, they can draw on those whiteboards. Zoom has a lot of powerful tools, so it is still very, very useful. And I want to sort of emphasize here that one is not better necessarily than the other. And in fact, what I really want to get through is that a lot of this online stuff that we've learned about and we've been forced to become experts in, we need to bring that into our new classroom situations going forward over the next year or two as we move out of this pandemic. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, as the old expression says. So some key takeaways. We need to understand what our students' needs and have a nice balance between these two if we can. We want to use the tools we learned from this emergency remote teaching situation, or ERT. So bringing in Google Forms, bringing in Flipgrid, bringing in Zoom if occasionally, if it's helpful and useful. We need to be flexible as we get going again. We need to start thinking about our plans possibly a little bit differently. One of the lessons that I took away from being online is this idea of synchronous, where the teacher is engaged in the classroom with students, either giving lectures or setting up group work or something like that. And then these asynchronous modes, where we're given students tasks to do, and they are doing it on their own using sort of online links, possibly online resources, and separating and understanding how these two dynamics play in our classroom, again, as we move towards more face-to-face, is really, really, really excellent. And of course, I can't emphasize this enough, find communities of people that you can collaborate with. So Google Forms, how can we use this tool? Here is a quick quiz that I've set up that I plan on doing in the live session to show people how you can automate marking of mini quizzes and how quick it can be deployed and used in the classroom. Again, if you're interested, feel free to jump on and check it out. You will get feedback on how you did on the quiz immediately. Why use Google Forms? Okay, lots of different reasons. So it's free with a Google account. It's powerful and very simple. You can use it in this hybrid teaching. So I plan to continue using Google Forms for my daily attendance, getting feedback on homework, for quick quizzes, pop quizzes, things like that. I'm going to be using it for tests and surveys. It's mobile and computer ready. So if a student doesn't have their laptop in class, they can use their cell phones. And nowadays, everyone has a smartphone. A basic smartphone can be used, and Google works very well on almost any device. And of course, you can export the data in Google Sheets or in Excel, which is very, very helpful if you want to keep track of attendance records, for example, or quizzes and tests. So how do you use Google Forms? I'm going to give a quick overview right now. This is going to be very fast, but at the end of this session, I will show you this in a little bit more detail. So this is what Google Forms looks like. If you have a Google account, a Gmail account, you already have a Google Forms account. And you'll notice up at the top, we have a template gallery, which is a very good place to start. If you want to set up an assessment, like a quiz or a test, they have a template that's ready for you, which is very, very useful. If you want to set up, for example, an attendance sheet, they have things that you can use like attendance sheets. So the template gallery is a great place to start. You can use the customize button to change the look. As you guys noticed, I have an image from today's PowerPoint slide. Google also offers you a selection of other kinds of beautiful graphics that you can use for free, which is great. And then there's a toolbar that is actually very intuitive and very easy to use for the most part. It takes a little bit of training and a little bit of getting used to, but once you're familiar with it, it is quite useful. And you can create many different kinds of questions, multiple choice questions, survey questions, tick box questions. It's very, very, very cool. You can add photos, videos, and do all sorts of other things. It's very, very powerful. Now, one of the things that's very useful and I use often is when you want to give the students these types of things. So you'll notice that I'm using QR codes and then a link. So oftentimes that link I can put on a Moodle or a virtual environment where all students have access to. Or I can use the QR code. So students simply in the middle of class pull out their phones, take a picture or point their cameras towards that QR code, and immediately they can do it on their cell phones in class, which is very, very useful. This is a simple QR code maker. It is ridiculously easy. There's several of them online. There's a link at the bottom, and I'll explain and show you that in a little bit more detail later on. So we can use it for attendance. We can use it for the beginning of class to see how students did on the homework. This is really helpful. If you give homework, sometimes the students had a lot of trouble, and this gives them the opportunity to give some quick feedback on that homework, and then you can troubleshoot it at the beginning of class. And it only takes sort of 5 minutes, very, very quickly. So it's very, very useful. Quizzes, of course, and then quick polls and those types of things. So in closing, again, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. What do I mean by this? As we transition away from online learning environments and we start going back to face-to-face, we want to take those lessons that we've learned and we want to start using them in our classrooms. Now, I understand that some of you your schools might be requiring you to go back face-to-face full-time. Some of you might entirely be online again for another semester. Like I said, in my situation, I'm sort of doing this weird hybrid thing where some classes are online, some classes look like they're going to be face-to-face. And my plan is, especially as we transition through, is to try to use this Google Forms as much as possible, continue using Flipgrid, which I learned a lot about, using all those lessons that we learned. Google Forms is extremely useful for all sorts of different things in the classroom, and it can make your life very, very easy. So if you're already familiar with some tools, something other than Google Forms, continue using what you know and you're comfortable with, and find areas in those face-to-face classes that you can continue using those. And of course, find good communities. So BELTA is an excellent resource. Big community of people all sharing interesting ideas and stuff. That is one amazing community. There's several others around the world. Here in Japan, JOLT, the Japanese Association for Language Teaching, is another great resource if you're interested. I've got a quick survey. If you are interested in some of the research that I've done or copies of the PowerPoint, please take a look at the link that's on your screen right now. I will also put it below in the YouTube link. And a huge thanks to BELTA for putting this conference on and inviting me to speak. I really am looking forward to all of the other presentations that are going to be happening. So a huge thank you to all the organizers and whatnot. And below is a little bit of my information. If you have any specific questions, I'm always happy to answer those. Mr. J at konan-u.ac.jp is a good way to get in touch with me. And if you're interested in any of my research, there is a couple of links down below. So huge thanks to everyone. That is my 20 minutes. If you are now interested in learning a little bit about how to set up a basic Google Forms for attendance, I'm going to go through and create one right now and walk you through, and walk you through that process. So if you're interested, please stay tuned. If you're just here for the presentation, huge thanks for joining me. Links can be found down below in underneath the YouTube video link. And hopefully I will hear from you soon, and hopefully you found this useful and interesting. Okay, just one moment. Let me just set up my web browser here very quickly. And I will walk you through this process of setting up your own Google form. Okay, so on your screen right now is the loading screen for Google Forms. If you are already a Google user, you can always click up in the corner where you find your information, and oftentimes they will be able to display it. If you just do a simple Google search for Google Forms, you will find it. Google has a suite of documents. They've got Docs, Sheets, Slides. Docs is like Microsoft Word. Sheets is like Microsoft Excel. Slides is like PowerPoint. And Forms is their sort of unique survey assessment tool. So it is very, very, very powerful. So I'm going to go into my Google Forms here just to show you what it looks like. And you will see I have hundreds of different types of forms that I've set up over time. Again, there is this beautiful template gallery up at the top. You can click on this and it has lots of really basic ones to use. But for today, we're just going to start with a blank one, just to show you how you can start from the very, very, very beginning. So we're going to set up a simple assessment, a simple attendance form / homework check. So I'll walk you through the entire process. So always, it's a good idea to name it. So I teach a course in global studies. So we're going to call this Global Studies 2021 class. You can add in a quick description. I'm going to leave this part here with the email address. So this is what this is the students need to type in a valid email address at the top, and then you can set it up so that you can automatically send them a copy of their response to your email. I'll show you that in a little bit. Now, the first question usually, so you just click down below here and it opens up this question area. You can see that there's several different ones that you can use. So the first question we're going to ask the students is what their name is. So I'm going to create this as a short answer question. I'm going to put in the question here, what is your name? Question mark. And then we've got a couple other options down at the bottom here. So required means it is something that they have to put in. I am going to make this a requirement because they have to put in their names because I want to know that they answered it. And this is an attendance sheet, so I want to see their name, that they answered this question. Perfect. So that one is set up. So the first thing that we have right now is the students will have to answer that first question. We can go over to this tab here. You'll notice that we've got add question, import questions, add title description, add an image, add a video, and add a section. For us right now, we're going to add a question, a new question down at the bottom here. And I'm going to also get them to put in what is your student ID, question mark. Now, this is a short answer question. Google is quite smart. It will automatically show that it's a short answer question. Now, there is some other things you can do that are a little bit more complex. If it is a string of numbers, you can actually ask Google to require 8 numbers, for example. That's a little bit more complex, but I wanted to give you the idea that you can make this sheet a little bit more complex. I'm also going to click required because I want this to be another required document. Next, I want to know if the students completed the homework or not. So let's say that I've got a couple of students who sometimes don't do the homework, and I want to be able to identify them quickly. So this is a really useful way to do it. And I'm going to make this a multiple choice question. So did you finish the homework? Now, immediately, you'll notice that Google has put in some suggestions, which are really helpful. So I am definitely going to add in a yes, I'm going to add in a no, and I'm going to make this a requirement. So now the students have to choose, yes, I finished the homework, no, I did not finish the homework. Now, I want to know how difficult the homework was. So some of my students, my Japanese students, are a little bit shy, and if I ask them how the homework was, many students won't say anything. But if I give them the opportunity to write down their answers sort of in private on a Google form, they are very, very responsive. And they usually tell me some really important things, either things that I can, issues that a lot of students had that I can deal with in the class, or ways I can make the homework assessment better. So I really like this kind of a question. So I'm going to make this question a short answer question. I'm going to ask the question, how was the homework? Actually, instead of a short answer question, I'm going to use the linear scale. So this means this will give me a scale between 1 to 5. So I'll just show you how this works. You can choose from what to what. So I like using 1 to 5. And on the one side, I'm going to say the homework was really difficult. And on the far side, I'm going to say it was really easy. So the students will have to pick between 1 and 5. 1 being really difficult, 2 being a little difficult, 3 being so-so, 4 being easy, 5 being really easy. And again, I'm going to make this a requirement. Now, I oftentimes ask the students a simple question like, explain your answer. So explain your answer to the last question. If you chose really easy, comma, please explain why. Okay, so I usually add in a little bit of extra there because sometimes the students don't understand. If I just say explain the answer to the last question, they get a little confused. And then what I'm going to do is I'm not going to make this a requirement. I oftentimes, if I don't, I'm going to put in optional. So the student knows that they can answer this question if they want. They don't have to answer it if they don't want. And then I always add a final question, and I leave this for every single time I do it. Basically, it's just a question saying, thanks for filling this in. Do you have any other questions for Mr. J? The students call me Mr. J instead of Mr. Jodoin. Or about the course. So occasionally a student will ask a general question about the course. Maybe halfway, when is the test, for example, or when is our final exam? And these are nice questions that I can immediately sort of answer for the class so that it acts as a nice reminder for me, and it gives me an indication that if the students actually need something. So, all right, many thanks for finishing the attendance form. Do you have any questions for Mr. J or about the course? And again, I'm going to make this optional so the students know that they don't actually have to write anything in. So again, down at the bottom here, this required button, if you don't click the required button, the students can submit the entire form without answering those questions. If you push the required button, you'll notice these little tiny red dots that go up next to them. The students have to answer those questions to finish the survey, or the Google form, excuse me. Okay, so here's what we've got right now. We've got this global studies. Let's test it out. So up at the top here, there's a couple things. There's add-ons. If there's some really cool things you can add on to Google Forms, that would be in an advanced video. We won't worry about that for now. Here's how you can customize the look. So I'll just show you that really quickly. For example, you can customize the theme. So you can choose an image that Google gives you. I really like this Earth one that's here. It's kind of cool. And once you do that, it changes the color scheme as well. puts in this beautiful color, and you can actually change the different colors if you want. Usually Google picks something nice. It's quite easy. Okay, so again, that's the template one up at the top here that you can see, customize theme. Here, this is really important. Preview is something that shows you what the students will see, and it gives you a chance to go ahead and do the form yourself before you deploy it to the students. I always like clicking on this. I usually click on it. This is what the students will see, so I give it a try. I'm just gonna add in my email. I'm gonna add in my name. I'm gonna add in my student ID for fun here. Did I finish the homework? Yes, I found it so-so. And then here, I'm just gonna write in some fake answers. Again, I don't have to write anything here because I chose it to not make it mandatory. Now, notice there's a button at the bottom here. If the students click on this, they will get an email with their responses. If they don't click on it, they get no email. So this is kind of useful. The students can track that information. You can force this on students. I'll show you that in a minute, where you can force the option. So anytime they fill in a form, they get an email about that. It's up to you. So I'm gonna push submit. Off goes my responses. You can see it says your response has been recorded. Great, the student has finished what they need to do. Now, I'm gonna go back into my Google form, and up at the top here, you'll notice there is questions, and then you see responses next to it. There's another tab. This is the responses that I just got. So I can go through and see, okay, so Joshua responded, which is great. He finished his homework, which is excellent. 4 was the response for that homework. And then any of the feedback that you get will show up here. And it looks like our form works really, really well. So what I'm gonna do is, just so I don't get mixed up, I'm gonna delete all the responses. I'm gonna delete that sample response that I put in. That's okay. And now our form is ready to send to our students, our attendance form. So I'm just gonna write here, attendance and homework check. Okay, good. Oops, I made a spelling mistake, and I think I made a spelling mistake down here too. I did. Showing you guys how bad of a speller I am. Okay, so we've got all this stuff set up. There's a couple of extra things I just want to show you here. So you'll notice that there's this mechanical wheel thing, settings up in the top right corner. You click on that and it gives you some extra options here. Collect email addresses, that I think is very useful as a teacher. You'll always get those email. Response receipts, again, if you push always, the student will always get a copy of their form responses in their email. I like, for attendance forms, making this if the respondents request it. That's that thing at the bottom of the response. You can add a couple of extra parts here. I usually leave those fine. Presentation, show link to submit another response. If you want the students to be able to, that's okay. If not, you turn that off. Here, you can put in your own message. I usually put Mr. J has received your response. Something simple like that. And then if you make a quiz, this is another area where you can make it so that you can add marks in. Of course, it's an attendance sheet and a feedback, so we don't need to do that at this point. So right now, as it stands, we have a ready to go Google form for our students. How do we send this to our students? There is a send button up in the top right corner. You click on that, and you will notice that there's a couple ways you can do it. You can put in all your students' email addresses. This I don't find that useful, especially as an attendance form. I use this link here. I shorten the link all the time, so it gives me a shorter link. And now I've got this link, which I can deploy in the classroom. So I can either put this up on a virtual space, like a Moodle, for students to access every day, or I can create a QR code that the students can use. If you do a quick Google search for QR code generator, plop this link in there, it will give you a QR code that you can put on a PowerPoint slide, for example. So you take this link, and now give this to the students and you can easily use that in the classroom. One thing that's really nice is that you can use the same link for the entire semester. What do I mean by that? Once you've created your slide with, let's say, a QR code and the link, every day I've been using the same attendance form. So I use the same slide, same link, same QR code. But after I've done the attendance with my class, I go ahead and I delete all the responses, and then I change the questions for the new day. Because of course the homework is going to change for the day. So for example, the next day, maybe they had a homework assignment, which was specifically about interviewing their parent. So I can ask them a question. I can add another question in here really easily. Okay, I'm going to drag this question. Notice I can grab the top and I can drag the question where I want. I'll put it under how was the homework? Or sorry, I'll put it under this one. And I'm going to ask a question about who did you interview? Who did you interview for your homework? And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to make it a required one. And first day, we just talked about the homework in general. The second day was this interview homework. I've added in this question. The third day of class, I can easily delete this question if I don't want it there by pushing the trash can at the bottom. Or I'll just make that come back, Capital Z. Or what I can do is add extra questions, or I can just go in and change the question itself, right, on here. So if they were doing a thing about relative clauses, I can ask them how hard or how do you find relative clauses? And we can give them another spectrum. Sorry, not spectrum. What is it called? Again, it is called, oops, a linear scale, right? Give them a linear scale. How easy or difficult is relative clauses? If that was the homework I gave, and the students can give me an indication and explain to me why. So Google Forms is a very, very, very useful way to quickly create forms. You can use them on a day-to-day basis. Again, you can use the same link and just change the form on a day-to-day basis, which I personally find very, very useful, and we'll continue using that as we go into our hybrid classroom. Okay, so I will just quickly show this last final one again. Again, a huge thanks to all those people that have stuck around to the very, very, very end. I really, really hope that you've enjoyed this presentation and found especially the Google Form part interesting. If you are interested in any of my other work, Language Education for Sustainable Development work, please check out my links and please feel free to send me an email. Many thanks for your time and efforts.